Warmly welcoming you to How Does She Do It, the podcast, with me, your host, Jo Ferroni. Join me on my journey as I explore finding a gentle balance in both business and life, because being kind to ourselves is our superpower. Hello, I hope you're well. And for those of you with children, I hope that the summer holidays have got off to a good start. I also am very much hoping that you're able to make some balance and find some time for you to re-energize and be able to really enjoy your time as the summer holidays continue. I'm very pleased to have prepared and had so many wonderful conversations in advance, so I'm able to bring you our fortnightly podcast throughout the summer as well. I'm really excited to bring today's conversation to you with the wonderful Mel Hemmings. She has shared so much for us all to not only work from, but be inspired by, and to really get educated on some things that maybe we didn't know about before. And with that in mind, I just hope that you will take as much away from it as I did. A little bit about Mel. Longtime resident of Woking in Surrey and mum of 3, Mel launched Bare and Fair Zero Waste and Refill Shop after being inspired by the zero waste movement and her own family's attempts at living more sustainably. Mel regularly speaks about all things zero waste and is passionate about encouraging people to take their next sustainable step wherever they're at on that journey. In today's inspiring and educational conversation that we all need to hear, Mel talks of how her shop really began from the seed of an idea in her home and how her support network, including so much help from family and friends, meant that she could make this goal a reality during a pandemic, no less. It was so interesting. We talk around where our recycling can actually end up once it's left at our roadside collections, and how we can start doing our bit by making small changes, and actually how a real starting point can simply be by watching videos and educating ourselves and our families. As well as some easy to follow tips, Mel also shares the reality of growing a business alongside growing a family, how she has good days and bad days, as well as how very glad she is to be a role model to her children in running a business and them seeing the behind the scenes experiences too. Luckily for me, because of meeting Mel and other zero waste and refill advocates a good few years ago now, I am already on my journey. But the great thing is, there is still so much more that I can do to make changes in my family, which I will, and I sincerely hope that you will listen and take some action too. It's far too important not to. I'm always keen for you to take a screenshot and share when you listen to an episode, but this one is especially important for you to share with all your family and friends. Please do spread the word and tag myself and Mel too, at How Does She Do It Life and at Bare and Fair. Then we can thank you personally. Enjoy the show. Mel, welcome to the podcast, and thank you so much for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
It's really lovely to get the opportunity to have a conversation with you. Actually, we do get to talk a little bit when I come into your shop, which we're obviously going to talk about today, but it feels like a real honor to be able to spend this time with you today, to really get the opportunity to learn a little bit more about you and your business, and to be able to this time share it with other people as well, because the messages that you have to share need to be shared far and wide as far as I'm concerned. So I'd love to start by asking you to tell us a little bit more about how Bare and Fair, your wonderful brand and business, began.
Sure. Yeah, well, it began at home, really. We were trying to, as many of us are at the moment, trying to do what we could to live a bit more sustainably. And I have to admit that my husband was actually a lot more kind of eco-conscious long before I was. He kind of moved our electricity onto a green tariff, and I got cross because it was more expensive. That we were having those kind of conversations. And I actually went to a talk at our amazing WWF centre, the Living Planet Centre, that we are so lucky to have in Woking. I went to a talk there about climate change and how I think the statistic they shared that really opened my eyes was how about 50% of our carbon emissions in the UK come down to how we live in our own homes and how we travel. And the lady who gave the talk just had some great ideas for, what we could actually do to change that. So that was the start of it for me. And we started making changes at home. And I kind of came across the whole zero waste movement at the same time, really. A friend lent me a book called Zero Waste Home, which is like the Zero Waste Bible, really, written by a lady called Bea Johnson, who is kind of one of the matriarchs of the movement. And yeah, again, just full of practical stuff that you could do that I just never thought to do. So it started like that. And then we'd kind of made a lot of changes quite quickly and felt like we were making sort of good headway with it and reducing our waste quite a lot of kind of easy wins to start with. And then it started getting harder. And I, on social media and the like, I'd seen these great zero waste shops that were popping up in sort of cool places like Brighton and London, in places that are way ahead generally on kind of green issues. And that gradually became a bit of frustration, like, well, why isn't there one around here? Which then became the question, well, maybe I should do it. And that's where it started, really.
Wow. I love that it was your husband that made the first move, if you like, by moving to that green tariff, and how interesting that you were the one going, whoa, that's a bit expensive. Yeah. And it must have started the conversation. And then for you to go on and to do the research by going to the talk, reading the books and what have you, it sounds like it's something that started in an incremental, small incremental steps, but then probably got quite a lot bigger, which is why the things started to get a little bit harder. You'd done the easier wins to make a difference. Yeah. And then as you got further down the path, you realized that there were bigger things that had to also be dealt with, but probably didn't happen quite so quickly. Now, I remember when we first met through the lovely Dwayna, a mutual contact of both of us. Yeah. And it was at that point that I think you were just starting out with this seed, if you like, of an idea. And you first started with a market stall. Is that right?
That's right. Yeah, I remember that meeting really well. I felt like a bit of a fraud because it was meant to be for business owners and I hadn't even started yet. I just had this idea and someone had said, oh, I'll come to this group, but, it'll help you start. And of course it did.
And so, that's why you should have been there as well. And it's funny, I have people come to my networking event say, oh, I shouldn't be here because I haven't actually got a business yet. But that's the point, to be around other business owners. And my goodness, what a difference it probably made by you being at Dwayna's meeting.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. What an amazing bunch of people, really. It was so inspiring. And yeah, just great to know that there were other people doing it as well and kind of making it happen for their own ideas, which was great. I started it as a weekly market stall in Woking on a Saturday because that's what kind of fit around our family life. Up until then, I'd been at home with our 3 young kids and hadn't sort of had a paid job for a few years. So that worked for us as a family. And it was also just, a low risk way of testing the market and seeing if there was enough interest.
Yeah. And so it came to the point, I should think, during the pandemic that there was a lot of change happening. And I was really, really amazed and surprised to hear that it was during that time that you upgraded, essentially, in terms of space, in terms of commitment, to a shop space in Woking in Surrey. How did that feel?
Yeah, it was terrifying, actually, if I'm totally honest. And it was, weirdly enough, it was a silver lining of the pandemic because I had been looking at shop spaces before then for a good sort of 6 months before. But, pre-pandemic world, you're looking at crazy long leases with ridiculous rent, and we just couldn't afford it really and take that kind of risk, sort of to take it from just a 1 day a week to then 6 day a week thing, and not quite knowing how it was going to pan out. So then the pandemic struck, and obviously sadly a lot of shops closed, and suddenly our town centres were a bit decimated really, weren't they? And suddenly I had the shopping centre approaching me saying, we've got empty units, would you like to take one on? We can negotiate on all the details. So it just felt like suddenly a door opened there, and it would have been silly not to take the chance, really. It all happened very, very, very quickly. It was quite frightening. I didn't really know what I was doing, I'll be honest. I think the day that I signed the lease, I had a panic attack, I think, for about 3 days afterwards. Actually, I suddenly thought, oh my goodness, what have I done? I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep, I was like crying on and off. I thought I just had a complete meltdown because it was terrifying, and I just suddenly thought, oh my gosh, how are we going to fit this around everything that we're already doing? And obviously then you've got the pandemic in the background and everything that's happening there with homeschooling and work changing for everybody. So yeah, that was the reality of it. But I'm so glad now that I took the step. And yeah, again, it's been quite incremental. It's quite a big shop unit, so we kind of partitioned it, and I've gradually moved the partition back over the last 18 months, and we filled it eventually. But yeah, it's been fairly organic in that sense.
Yeah, thank you for your honesty. I really, really appreciate you sharing about that state of panic, that fear as you signed. It's a massive responsibility. And when you said about the pandemic going on in the background, my goodness, I mean, there were many times when I could not even function during the pandemic, aside from getting out and doing a bit of exercise and making sure my kids were okay. So for you to be making big decisions, big changes, and quite massive steps forward, it doesn't surprise me one bit that there was a bit of fear induced in you as well. And to see you thriving now, and to be able to look back and go, that was a brilliant decision for me, that was an amazing step forward, it must feel incredibly gratifying.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll just say thankful for all the people I had around me, actually, really. My husband was so supportive, kind of in that sense. It felt like we very much made the decision together, and that we were just going to give it a go, and we knew it was going to impact our lives quite significantly, but it just seemed like now or never, and let's just go for it and see what happens. And again, family and friends that sort of all came in and helped me, like even just like painting the unit before we moved all the shelving and stuff in. I had so many offers of help, which was just incredible. And in terms of the pandemic, I actually found, once I got over the initial shock of it and I got my head around it a bit more, I actually found it really helpful to have a project and something to be working on and kind of thinking about. It was quite a helpful thing to have that focus in the middle of all the chaos of the pandemic, really.
I appreciate that. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I'd love to talk about the fact that you are a mum of 3. You've already spoken about your family life and your husband. How has it been growing the business around them? Because like you say, from going to that idea to the market stall to a big unit in a large town centre, that's a lot of change is going on. How has it been for you parenting amongst all of this?
Yeah, honestly, I don't really know how to answer that. Parenting is just a crazy ride anyway, isn't it? And I think in terms of, there's days when I think, this is great for us and it's working, and, I'm showing the kids that they can do something like this. And especially, we've got 2 girls and a boy, and I feel like, especially in terms of kind of helping break down stereotypes, and just seeing that actually mummy runs her own business and she's got friends who run their own businesses, and that's not something that every kid gets to see, I guess, and a bit of what goes on behind the scenes. I think is good for them to kind of be exposed to that as well. In terms of the environmental side, there's a wide range of reactions from them. So my eldest daughter is in that, she's very much in that eye rolling phase of, she's 9 and she likes to roll her eyes at me a lot. And, you know, she likes to wind me up and sort of be like, oh, mommy, we bought these because they're environmentally friendly, like rolling her eyes. I just want the normal ones, that kind of conversation. We get a lot of that with her. And the others sort of varying responses, you know, depending on where their heads are at and what they're focusing on. So, yeah, I think that there's good days and bad days. There's days when it feels like, you know, this is a terrible thing to do and I'm not seeing my kids enough and I'm, you know, missing things that I don't want to miss. But I guess that's probably, you know, talking to other parents. I don't think that's necessarily just running your own business issue, is it? I think that's just a life issue. We're all juggling stuff, aren't we?
We are, yeah. And there'll be so many different situations, you know, with a gazillion different families up and down the country. And yeah, I think we all face that guilt at some point, or that, what if? But, you know, we're doing the best thing essentially for ourselves and for our families. And what I love is that even though there is a little bit of eye rolling at times, which I love that from your daughter, they will have this messaging literally ingrained in them. And what a great thing. Not only are you showing that mummy can run a business, but you are doing good for future generations. And that's a huge, huge thing to be modeling for your children. So I guess the passion for supporting the zero waste movement has grown over the years that you've been doing this. It must also feel really powerful. So you talked initially about the smaller things that you did at home. It must feel very powerful to be sharing, and I love the way that you share on your social media especially, but sharing ideas, sharing answers, if you like, for people, how they can start making those little steps as well. How does it feel to be influencing people in this positive way?
Yeah, it's great. And it's one of the reasons I love that our shop is in like a big commercial shopping centre. It's not your usual location really for a zero waste shop. A lot of them are kind of out of town or a bit hard to find, whereas we're sort of, you know, next to Krispy Kreme and opposite New Look and all these well-known names. And I love that people just wander in and again, we see a whole spectrum of response, really. You know, some people are looking for us and come and find us and know what they're doing and, you know, already well on the journey. And some people literally wander in having just, you know, been to Primark or whatever and don't have a clue what it's all about. And I think me and my members of staff, one thing we really love is just having those conversations with people who've never come across these kind of alternatives before, or it's just not on their radar. Like, those are my favourite kind of conversations. Just getting to start it with someone, really.
Yeah, I think it's really important. And actually in this day and age, well, I'm just thinking about a supermarket, for example. I was speaking to a guy in the supermarket the other day and he said, they're cutting a load of jobs here because they're getting rid of a load of the tills that we sit at, you know, the checkouts, because they're expanding the self-scan sort of thing. So on the whole, I would say we're veering so much further away from conversation and human contact. But in your environment where you're working, that's probably the most important thing, to keep the conversations going and to be able to educate people, because I think people are willing to learn and willing to listen from someone that can guide them. And so they don't have to go and read all of the books or, you know, listen to all of the guidance and videos and what have you online. You know, you can almost bring it all together and let them know what they need to know that can work in their life. And what I'd also like to add is the mindfulness of coming into Bear and Fair to refill my shampoo, my washing up liquid, spices, nuts, all of these different things. It's not about going and doing a quick trolley dash. It's, you know, you have to you have to take things a little bit slower, actually. And I think that in itself really helps us to think about what we're doing and to take a breather and realize life doesn't have to be all quick and convenient and faceless, actually. So I do love coming in. I'd like to move on to the main sort of topic we were going to cover today, because you've got some really important messages to share, and I love that I've got an audience that you can share them with. And that is about the plastic waste crisis. We're seeing it a lot more these days in the media, and there's a lot more messaging around it, but it doesn't mean that, I don't know, it's something that we can just sort of go, oh, well, everyone else has got that sorted, so it'll be all right. You know, they're talking about it now, so it'll all be fine. I'd love for you to talk around why we all need to take action. And also, I know that you wanted to talk around how it's not just about saving the oceans as well.
Yeah, sure. So I think for me, a big moment in my journey with this was I watched a few videos that Greenpeace have made. So Greenpeace have been campaigning about plastic waste for decades. I mean, they have been well ahead of the curve, as they are with many things. And they've got a whole load of videos on YouTube, should you care to check any of those out. But I watched one it was about 3 years ago now, it was some investigating they'd done into what was happening to all our plastic that we put out for recycling in the UK. And this has all come, you know, there's been a lot in the media since then. But, you know, seeing these pictures of, I mean, literally mountains and mountains of plastic waste, which was undeniably from the UK. You know, they were picking out, you know, Tesco cheese wrappers, Morrison's crisp packets and things like that. And you can tell it's fairly recent stuff, you know, some of it. And it was literally piled up in mountains of waste next to these villages in Malaysia, and people were literally living in it, like living and growing food in our plastic rubbish. And it turns out that a lot of our plastic waste that we put out for recycling was being shipped overseas, which wasn't that well known. It was, again, it came to light a couple of years ago in the media when China started refusing to import it. We were basically paying other countries to take our rubbish. The theory was that it was then being recycled by locals, you know, and that's what we were paying them for. But the reality was they just couldn't cope with the volumes of it. They were taking it because we were paying them to. So the governments were happily taking the money and taking the waste. But the reality was, you know, people on the ground just couldn't cope with it. And a lot of it was getting burnt. And then that was affecting, you know, there were clips of people's kids with respiratory problems that were directly caused by the burning of rubbish, you know, outside their villages. And that really opened my eyes to the fact that, you know, like climate change, it's the world's poorest that are already kind of facing the brunt of the plastic waste crisis. And it's actually a social justice issue as much as it is an environmental one. You know, we all, thank you, David Attenborough, we're all very aware of, you know, what it's doing to the oceans, and that's brilliant. But actually there is a whole other side to it. You know, it's a humanitarian crisis as well as an environmental one. And that was a big moment for me in my journey, just realizing that actually. And it's the kind of thing that, you know, once you've seen, you can't unsee it. And I just thought, actually, I'm not okay with other people in the world suffering like that because of my convenience. Obviously, you don't want to kind of pile on the guilt, but it's just, you just see it's a broken system. And actually what I thought was being dealt with isn't being dealt with. And there's more going on here than meets the eye.
Gosh, that is really huge. And I'm just trying to think where to go back to in all that you've just said. It is a humanitarian crisis, and there are a few things that are really hard to swallow.
Yeah.
The fact that not only was a country accepting the recycling, I'm going to put recycling in air quotes, because they weren't able to cope. So for them to accept it, even though they knew they couldn't cope with the volumes because of the money, is very difficult to feel any kind of understanding about. But also for our governments to to do it, probably knowing that they didn't have the ability to deal with it and to recycle it. So the amount of human lives that are being affected is unthinkable. But also, you know, I'm thinking about in our street, the bins go out every week. And I think that, I mean, let's be honest, there'll be some people that don't even recycle ever. Yeah. Now they're one extreme, and I should imagine that most people that listen to this at least will recycle as much as they can. But I think we're almost doing it in good faith that by using this service, it is going to be dealt with as environmentally friendly a way as possible, not to mention all the other effects need to be kept to an absolute minimum. And I think that maybe there are some people out there that think, well, I recycle my stuff, so that's fine. And that's why I do buy my hand wash in a squeezy thing. Yeah, a single use hand wash, shampoo and what have you. Yes, I buy that, but I recycle it, so it's fine. And I think that because there is this service as an option, we almost think that because it's a service and it's provided in our country and we're a decent country, it's all got to be, you know, all the right things are being done, but that's not necessarily the case. And I think that's where us really believing that, yes, little old me can make a difference by refilling rather than single use plastic all the time. And also maybe, you know, buying our veggies in a veggie box, which doesn't have, I mean, I was looking this morning, you know, as we're preparing for lunches, for school lunches, you know, the shrink wrapping on a cucumber, just like, oh my gosh, this is one item. But, you know, we buy lots of them and we get through a lot, and we're just one little family in a very big world. So I know that there are, you know, you can't do everything, but there must be so many things that people can look at and think about, not their convenience, but the good of the world.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think I certainly felt cross, like I'd been a bit deceived by the powers that be. You know, you like you say, you're doing things in good faith, aren't you, and putting your trust in the systems. And I still think people should put out their recycling, you know, no doubt, because, you know, by doing that, you're voting for where you want it to go. And, you know, you're still letting the government know that you want your stuff to be recycled. But yeah, I think the latest statistic is that only about 10% of all plastic ever made has been recycled. The other 90% of it is just floating around in all sorts of places.
Yeah. And it's out of sight, out of mind, isn't it? In terms of us living in the UK, we don't step out of our villages and be overcome by piles of someone else's rubbish. How would we feel if it was literally placed on our doorstep? I mean, yeah, it's just not right. These are human beings that are being affected and they have no say.
Yeah, and I guess that's the dark side of our, you know, the great services that we do have, and they are great. Like, what a blessing to have our rubbish picked up from outside our house. But, you know, the dark side of that is, like you say, out of sight, out of mind. We don't really think about it, do we?
So I really would urge people to, and perhaps even you could share with me some links to those Greenpeace videos that I could share in the show notes, because I certainly would enjoy is not the word. I certainly would benefit from watching them with my boys. And I kind of like that you can't unsee it when you've seen something like that, because that just solidifies your reasoning in, you know, doing the right thing. So we do a lot ourselves anyway in terms of trying to do the right thing, but there's probably more we could do. And by seeing something like that, that hopefully will kickstart us into, you know, looking at perhaps those more hard things that will make a difference. Like you talked about, it does get harder sometimes once you've done all the little bits and bobs. So yeah, please afterwards send me those Greenpeace links and we'll share the videos. For now, I would love you to be able to help the listeners a little bit, because they might be listening today thinking, crumbs, okay, I don't know where to start. Quite frankly, I would like to make a difference. Life's been really busy and I've always thought I should, but actually hearing Mel speak, I'd like to make a difference from now on. We've all got to start somewhere, haven't we? And I wonder whether you might be able to share maybe 3 easy steps as to how people can start making a difference in their own lives.
Yeah, sure. Well, my first one was going to be actually just to give yourself a little bit of time to have your eyes opened, actually, because I think, it's all very well sort of having good intentions, but I think but personally, that's what keeps me going with it when it gets frustrating and annoying and inconvenient or whatever, is just thinking back to what I've seen of the reality of it, like those videos. There's loads of great documentaries now, on Netflix and Prime Video or whatever. One that I've seen that I would recommend to anyone is The Story of Plastic. So yeah, just give yourself, they're not very long, I think it's about an hour, watch as a family if you want, but it's just a really easy way, literally sit and watch and get a little bit informed, maybe more than you were before, about why this is important. I think you just have to keep coming back to the why, really, don't you? To keep going with all the changes. So that'd be my first one. Secondly, just to take note of what you're actually throwing in your bins, which sounds really obvious, but I found that a really good place to start. Just noticing what are the disposable things that I keep putting in my bin over and over and over again, and sort of going further back, that I actually keep paying for as well, whether it's disposable napkins or whatever it is, or baby wipes, or we pay for those stuff over and over and over and over again, and yeah, they're cheaper sort of initially, but if you add up what you've spent on those over a year, goodness me, you can save so much money as well with reusables. So just noticing, what do I keep throwing in my bin on a daily basis or a weekly basis or a monthly basis, and not just your black bin, but your recycling bin as well, because zero waste isn't just about the plastic, it's about everything, just not wasting anything that we don't need to. So that would be number 2. And then thirdly, I just wanted to touch on one reusable that I just think is so great, talking to the women here. One thing that we always recommend and sort of draw people's attention to, which is an easier swap than it sounds, is to switch to reusable sanitary products, if that's applicable to you. So there are such things as period cups. Most of us have heard of the period pants now that you can get, reusable sanitary pads. They are kind of, ironically, I think it's one of those swaps that people get the most scared about or are a bit intimidated by, just not sure about, but actually sort of universally, having done this and talked to people about this for about 3 years now, it is universally one of the swaps that everybody is so thankful they've made after they've done it. No regrets, no looking back. It is a cost up front, but it saves you money in the long run. Environmentally, every time you use them, you've got the satisfaction of knowing that you're making a difference. We flush 2.5 million tampons every day in the UK, just in the UK a day, and that's all going out to sea. Most of it, the average woman uses 11,000 disposable sanitary products over a lifetime. So, with reusables, you can literally bring that down to under 100 for your whole lifetime. So, you can literally, see the difference and have that satisfaction. So in that sense, it's a really good swap. They're healthier for you as well. There's a lot of research now showing that a lot of cotton tampons often still have traces of pesticides in if they're not organic, which is leaching into our bodies and causing all sorts of health issues. That's only just sort of coming to light now. And they're more comfortable as well. Most, in fact, everybody I know who I've ever talked to about this sort of comments on, gosh, the period cup, period pants, they're just so much more comfortable than all those horrible plasticky products. So yeah, I'd always recommend that as, you might look at that and think, gosh, that's the last thing I would want to change. But actually, I would challenge you to make it the first thing you change. And I can almost guarantee you that you won't look back.
Yeah, and I wholeheartedly agree with you, because I did make the change to environmentally friendly and, not throw away sanitary products a few years ago now. And actually I got caught short. I was away recently and needed to buy something, and I couldn't get over the packaging. I think when you've stepped away from something and you come back to it, it opens your eyes even more. I couldn't get away from all of the plastic, all of the packaging, all of the perfume as well. And you just think, what is this that I'm putting near or in my body? And like you say, the pesticide trace that could be, and bleach as well, I think,
yes,
with some of the tampons and what have you. I think probably because we've grown up with these things, you just carry on with them. But I'm really glad you've brought up sanitary products today, because I didn't know 3 years ago. I didn't know until that point that there even was an alternative. And I know, like you say, people will have heard of the period pants and the cups and what have you now, but maybe they haven't, or maybe they've heard of them, but they've never seen them. And so it wasn't in the supermarket when they were in there for their regular shop. So out of sight, out of mind. So I love that message that you are bringing. And I would really urge women to make that change for all of those reasons. I would love people to check out your website to see, what does a zero waste shop look like? What is it that's in there? So we're not going to go through all of the products today, but I think people will be surprised at how much replacement we can make in our lives. So I would really urge people to come and check out your website. Is there anything people can do if they don't have a zero waste shop in their area?
Yes, I think so. So, if you're doing most of your shopping, like your grocery shopping at a supermarket, most of them now, they have apples in plastic bags and they have apples loose. So it's easy to make little changes like that. Take your own bags, get the ones that aren't wrapped in plastic. I know a few supermarkets are offering that have, meat sort of butcher counters and fish counters. You can now take your own containers and they'll put it in there for you instead. And then, of course, we've now got loads of options for veg boxes and the like, whether it's organic you're after or not. I think they're much better now, much better in terms of a wider range of budgets, I think. A lot of the stuff that we sell in the shop, not the refillable stuff, but you can buy stuff online. It's all readily available online now. A lot of it, obviously, you won't be able to kind of pick it up and touch it and ask questions, but if you've done a bit of research or spoken to someone, a friend who who's made a swap, you can easily get a hold of things like bamboo toothbrushes online now. So I think there's still a lot you can do, and supporting local businesses as well. If you're lucky enough to have like a local butcher or a local greengrocer or somebody, go shop with them.
Yeah, that's brilliant. That's really helpful, because I don't want someone to listen and go, well, that's all very well. I haven't got a zero waste shop near me, so I can't do it. So yeah, thank you for those tips. And I would just like to go back to point 1 that you made, which was essentially about researching and educating ourselves first rather than diving straight in blind. I'd like to add to that I'd really love to encourage people to make that a family-wide research, whether it's watching the documentaries together or whether it's just having some family conversations around the topic, based on whatever age level you're working with. But I do think that to start this conversation at a young age is surely going to have a positive impact in the world, as these kids will grow up with it almost being second nature, rather than having to undo so many bad habits, if you like. I'm speaking as someone who grew up in the 80s, where it was all about convenience and, plastic and, oh God, all the plastic accessories. Now I think about it. But these children that we're bringing into the world now can be educated from such an earlier age, and that ripple effect has got to be amazing, hasn't it?
Oh, I think so. Yeah. I mean, they've already got the advantage of it kind of being introduced in curriculum now. Yeah, actually, I one ridiculous story from our journey was I can't even remember what it was now, one of these documentary programs with the kids, and it was about plastic waste, and they were focusing on these seabirds that were ingesting so much plastic that they then couldn't fly and were just like dying out as a species. And I hadn't realised when I sat down to watch it with the three kids that they were cutting birds open and looking at what was inside these birds, and there were quite horrific scenes of birds coughing up plastic. And I watched it with the kids, and I was sat there thinking, oh no, this is a bit much. This is a bit much. What are they going to think? And one of my daughters started crying. She turned to me and she said, "Mummy, is this actually real?" And I said, "Yeah." And she's like, "What? This isn't done on a computer?" And I was like, "No, this is actually happening." And she burst into tears and just sobbed and sobbed. And then, I was sitting there thinking, oh my gosh, parenting fail. What have I done? I've like scarred her for life. And she cried on and off about those birds for about 48 hours. Yeah. And then she suddenly stopped crying about it and was like, "Mummy, they wrap our cheese in our preschool lunches in cling film. Can we write to the company that does the lunches and ask them not to do that?" I was like, "Yeah, we can." Great. And then she like drew a picture of the birds with the plastic, and we posted it to the catering company. I'm not even sure they did anything about it, but I just thought, actually, come on, like there was I sitting there worrying that I'd scarred her for life, and actually she just needed a bit of time to process. And I think as adults we need that as well, like we need to give ourselves, we're so concerned about being like productive and doing stuff all the time, like sometimes you just need to give yourself a bit of time to be like, do you know what, this is like what a terrible situation we're in, and just give yourself a moment to like let it sink in, not so that it wrecks you, but so that you can then go on and do something about it. And I just think kids are so good at that. That's been my experience with our kids anyway. So yeah, don't worry about them. I think they can handle it. Yeah. Probably better than us.
Wow. Could I invite her on the podcast? She sounds brilliant. I mean, what a lovely, I can really hear what you're saying. Parenting fail. Let's be honest, we all face parenting fails, but it absolutely wasn't. I just think that's such a great example, and how you relate that to adults as well. We're in such a constant culture, aren't we? And I'm definitely one for trying to step off, process stuff, whether it's how I'm feeling, whether it's something I've read, whether it's an interaction I've had with someone. And I really try and model that for my boys as well. All feelings aren't going to feel great. Yeah. But once we've given them time, given them space, we can then move forward, surely, with bigger spring in our step. And in her case, that motivation to write to the catering company, that is not the only time she'll ever do something like that in her life. She is going to see something that isn't right, and she will do something about it, rather than just sit and think, well, it's not my problem, or nothing's going to happen anyway. Living good parenting, I really respect that.
Well, it wasn't planned, it just happened. But yeah, I mean, I think that's it. When you talk about getting informed, getting educated, there's that side of it, but there's also, I think it's really important to look at the good news as well. Like, we only see the bad news, don't we? But actually, and again, talking about youngsters, I follow a few Instagram feeds that are about positive environmental news, and the amount of stories of like young, generations behind us in their sort of, teens or 20s, coming out with these amazing ways of dealing and kind of tackling this crisis head on. Like there's a young guy, I can't remember his name now, who's created a system for dealing with a huge floating plastic waste. I can't remember what they call it now, but there's a huge, it's like 3 times the size of France or something, floating in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, and no countries want to deal with it, because it's where the ocean currents have caused all this plastic to kind of collect. and there's animals living on it now, and
Yeah.
it's just a disaster. And there's this young guy who's basically created a system. He decided, I'm going to do something about this, and he's created it's a bit like a kind of fishing net thing, but with suckers, and it basically is designed. They're going to build a whole fleet of them and send it to start dealing with it, and it's going to take them decades. But he's done it, and he was like in his teens when he had this idea. And I just think stuff like that is really important to pay attention to as well, because otherwise, you do get a bit overwhelmed with it all. But just to know that the changes you're making it might just be not buying a cucumber wrapped in plastic once a week, but actually it's part of a bigger picture of so many people of different generations doing stuff, and at some point it's all gonna really make a difference.
I would love, before we close our conversation today, to just touch on a couple of things. We've already talked a little bit around working for yourself, but I wonder whether you might be able to share the hardest thing that you find about working for yourself.
Sure. So I think for me, I was thinking, it's a really good question. I think it is probably just that sense of you're never done. Like, you never finish the to-do list. You never get to the end of it, do you really? And I think personally, I find it's really easy to always look at what you haven't done, what you haven't managed to do yet, or what you haven't done quickly enough. And that's like a physical kind of practical burden on your time, isn't it? But it's also a mental and emotional burden. And I find that really hard.
Yeah, it's interesting. Everyone comes up with something slightly different when they answer this question. And I just find myself nodding away. I don't think anyone's given that answer before, but it's so true. And I think that we don't necessarily think about it that much, but it is having that heavy drain on us mentally as well as physically. So I hear you, and I'm sure you've got ways that you deal with that. So let's find out, what is the absolute best thing about working for yourself?
Well, I think, again, it's a really hard one to answer, actually, but I think probably it's that at the end of the day, you have the final say. And I think there's a great deal of freedom in that, actually, and sort of potential for creativity as well, which goes into what would be a very close second, and that is meeting lots of other business owners, because I just think generally they're a really inspiring bunch, people who are energetic and creative and want to change the world, really, on whatever scale that is. And I've really, really enjoyed that part of running a business, just getting to meet other business owners and all those kind of networks that there are out there.
Oh, that's really, really lovely. It gave me the tingles, that, because I can just feel how passionate you are about the good stuff that comes from what you do and being in that position. I like that you mentioned creativity as well, because I suppose some jobs you could be in could just literally almost crush the creativity, or that just doesn't feature at all, but we can blossom in whichever way that we feel we naturally want to go in. And the final question that I ask at the end of every podcast is around the name of my business. How does she do it? Because I don't believe that she does it all. I'd love you to share with us one thing that you do or perhaps don't do in your life anymore to ensure that you remain on track, healthy and happy.
Yes. So this is one that I've been attempting for years, but I think running my own business has really brought it into focus, if that makes sense. So it's actually kind of rooted in my faith. Anyone that knows me knows that my church community is really important to me. And so having a day off, having a day of rest is obviously quite an ancient thing, an ancient tradition in the faith tradition I'm from. But I'd never really taken it that seriously up until a few years ago. It's kind of like, well, yeah, it's, you have a day off, whatever. But actually, I found really earmarking that and making sure I have a day off a week has been really important since starting the business, and has come to mean a lot more, and actually be a sort of a really necessary fire break in my week. So interestingly enough, when I took on the shop unit, one of the stipulations initially in the lease was that we had to be open 7 days, and I just said, I'm not doing it. I said, I just can't, I actually can't do that. Like, I don't think it's healthy. I don't believe in our 24/7, like everything open all the time, every day. And that expectation that there is, especially, it might be all well and good for a big brand to be able to do that, but a small business, it's just not doable. So that was quite an interesting discussion with the powers that be in the shopping centre. We are now only open 6 days a week, so I've never done 7 days a week. But every week I'm so thankful that I put my foot down about that. And I have little rituals now for my day off, like I turn my phone off on a Saturday night and have my phone off for 24 hours, just little things like that. And I don't do it every week because I'm still getting into it and I'm still learning how to do it, but it's been an absolute lifeline for me.
Beautiful. Well done for sticking to your values, and how wonderful that you're recognizing the enormous benefits. And I'd love to, in a separate conversation, talk to you around the stepping away from your phone, because that's something that I don't see many people doing. And it's certainly something that I try and do as well. It isn't a flick a switch and suddenly every Sunday, like in your case, it's off, but it's a work in progress, isn't it? And I think it's the fact that you want to protect that time. You want to protect you want to rest. You want to be away from that to-do list, which never ends, is a powerful move, and I really respect you for it. Well, we're at the end of our conversation. It's been an absolute joy. I've learned so much, and you really have put extra fire in my belly to get out and to learn more myself and to take my life, if you like, to the next level. I really enjoy refilling and using reusable products and what have you, but there's more for me to do, and I'm really looking forward to getting into that. So thank you from me. And thank you also for sharing as much as you have done with my listeners today. I have no doubt that they will take so much inspiration followed by action from our conversation. If people would like to learn a little bit more about you, Mel, and Bear and Fair, where can they find you?
Well, we have a shiny new website, which we've just redone. So that's probably the best place to go. It's just bearandfair.co, just .co. Otherwise, we're on Instagram and Facebook as well.
Lovely. And is that at Bear and Fair?
So Facebook is at Bear and Fair, and Instagram is at bearandfair.co. Yeah.
Wonderful. We'll make sure that all of those links go in the show notes so people can just easily click through and come and start following you. And all that is left for me to say is thank you from the bottom of my heart. I've absolutely adored this conversation.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's always a joy to get to talk about it, actually. So busy doing sometimes, aren't we? It's really nice just to talk.
Thank you so much for listening today. I really hope you enjoyed the episode. If you did, I'd love you to take a moment to share and subscribe too. Come and join me over at How Does She Do It Life on both Facebook and Instagram. And until we speak again, I wish you a wonderful week ahead.